Yeah, it's probably the the last webinar we will have for 2025, and I don't really think that we will have another webinar next week. It's kind of yeah, and yeah. First of all, thanks everyone for joining the webinar, and I'm Yunjun, and I'm the founder of Riding Wave today because well, I mean it's already the end of this year, right? And typically in the past, what we talk about a lot about I mean the technical details, right? Well, Iceberg, well, Kafka, stream processing, whatever, right? But for this meetup, we're just to have a casual conversation with experts well, in the data infra domain, and let's just have a recap of 2025 because well, a lot of things will have yeah has happened, right? Well, and that definitely very yeah, very exciting time to be honest. Um and Stan, well, I mean, so I'm not sure whether we want to have a self intro, do a pretty quick self intro.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm the Kafka guy. My name is Stanislav. You can call me Stan. I worked in Confluent for I think it was 6 years. Then I
Oh,
basically
six
started.
years.
I think it was 6 years. Yeah, I forget the count. Yeah, 6 years exactly.
When
I'm an
when you
Apache Kafka
started?
committer in 2018. I started in 2018 and I quit in 24. So I wrote that whole wave of going up. If I would have stayed a year more, I would have seen the sale to IBM, which was a shocker to everyone. But yeah, no, I'm a Apache Kafka committer. I've been an engineer forever, and nowadays I write more than I write more text than I write code. But I have a lot of fun and I keep up with the industry and I write and talk about it. And yeah, I see Tyler joined as well. Hey Tyler.
Hello. Sorry.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. Have you started your vacation?
Sorry, say that again?
Have you started your vacation?
No, no. I had like three different invites for this
I'm
on my
so
calendar.
sorry, guys. I hope you hear
Well,
me. I had some incident along the way, so
Oh yeah. I saw your message, right?
yeah,
And
sorry. It wasn't me, but I just got delayed. Apology for this.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So yeah, I actually just yeah before he joined us, Stan actually just did a very quick intro about well himself and he's a Kafka guy. Everyone knows him, and he used to work in Confluent for 6 years, and so yeah, he's definitely always an engineer, right? Well, and he can definitely dive very deep about what I mean what's happening in Apache Kafka, right? As well as the entire data streaming world. And Tyler, I'm not sure whether you want to do a self intro. Yeah.
sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Tyler Akido, currently the CTO at Red Panda. I've been there for a little over 6 months, focusing, kind of helping the company focus on the agentic data plane stuff that we're building out going forward. Before that, I was at Snowflake for about 5.5 years, focusing on streaming related stuff like streaming ingest and dynamic tables. And before that, I was at Google for about 12 years doing stream processing and lots of stuff there. So yeah, that's sort of the short version of my intro. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great, thanks. And Philip, it's your turn.
Thank you. First of all, it's almost a deja vu here with this bunch of people. It's almost like feels what a month ago I was with the same people in a bit different. Well, with Jean, not with you, but we chat very regularly. Very happy to be here, Philip. I've been doing cloud distributed data systems for almost 10 years now, especially with focus obviously on Apache Kafka. I've been playing around with Flink and more recently also with ClickHouse. So I do Kafka. This is what I usually do from the business side, making sure that we can deliver and develop the best possible Apache Kafka experience in the cloud.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so but yeah, definitely thanks all of you guys for to join the webinar. So yeah, as I mentioned, well, I mean, this is the basically a recap, right? Well, yeah, typically what we do is as well can just discuss well, what have happened, right? And probably also make some predictions about well 2026 next year. And I mean, yeah, let's get started. Um, Yeah, so we'll cover several things. Data streaming, lakehouse. Yeah, you know that's why Iceberg is definitely a really big thing, right? Well, and yeah, we will cover that. And definitely, I know that we're definitely all of our guys were data infra guys, right? But we are definitely living in the AI era. And I know that's why, especially for Rapenda, right? Well, you guys were definitely very advanced in that part. We'll also cover that part. And then just to have some open discussions about the key challenges and whatever, right? And also make some predictions about for the data and AI for 2026. Um, all right. Okay. Yeah. Let's start with the data streaming. So, typically I don't really want to talk too much about the commercial part, but for yeah, I think this just happened last week. So, anyways, we probably could not avoid discussing this, right? Guys, just tell me how do you feel about the news about what the Confluent got acquired by IBM? Yeah, don't be shy, right? Well, I believe that's what this definitely impact everyone. Yeah, who want to go first? Um,
You can
Tyler,
just
you
call
want
us
to?
out because
Yeah.
you have a lot of
Yeah.
people with very strong opinions here and definitely not, like biased. So you can just call us out.
Yeah. I can do a pretty quick. Yeah. Very transparent. Well, yeah, show my mind. Well, to be very transparent. Well, I heard the news. Well, a few days ago, right? Well, probably 10 days ago, and that was in the evening, right? Well, and there are some rumors about okay, Confluent will get acquired by IBM. To be very transparent, well, when I first heard about news, well, I was a little bit frustrated. Why? Because it's definitely the biggest company in the data streaming world, right? And definitely it's happy ending, right? Well, it's good for the shareholders, and I personally also yeah, own the Confluent stock, where definitely I earn money. But the thing here, that's why it's more about okay, whether you want to um run the project, right, for Apache Kafka independently. Yeah, because running Kafka in Confluent is will be definitely totally different from okay running, let's say, Kafka in IBM or in some other big companies, right? But yeah, just got a little bit frustrated. But actually, one day later, I feel that's why it's definitely a really exciting time for all of us. Well, because look, um, so if it's definitely a new opportunity, right? Well, for Ivan, right? Well, I believe that well, okay, you guys will always in the really big well in Kafka world, and we know that well, okay, we cannot always just compete about well the yeah with confidence regarding the, let's say, the price or whatever, right? And I believe that well for this acquisition, it will definitely drive more innovations, and people are not will probably jump off of the box, right? Well, in the past, we always compete about okay, let's be cheaper than Confluent, and let's just be faster than Confluent, right? But nowadays, well, we probably can, yeah, find something new and find something that more innovative to work on, right? Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
I,
And Philip, you want to share something? Yeah.
Um, I think that this is a very natural thing at the end of the day. We have been observing. I've been with Kafka for 11 years, believe it or not. I
Mm-hmm.
installed it on bare metal. Then we moved on in a previous life into a in a private cloud, then in a real cloud, then trying to do Kafka, cloud native. So I've been with Kafka since very, very early in various capacities. And I've been observing something which is happening to the market. It's normal, right? Kafka is a solved problem for Kafka users. Like if you know Kafka, you have a solved problem on your hands, and the world doesn't need another 30% better Kafka. And it's okay. I think this is definitely something which is okay. So where we are actually witnessing is the same on, like on the vendor side. At the end of the day, you will get acquired by somebody who wants to lock in this massive customer base for the next 10 years. Because make no mistake, this is critical infrastructure. I was one of the first people in the world where we started replacing mainframe with Kafka. And I can tell you the last time when the mainframe got upgraded was 1982. So the upgrade was completed a few years ago. So I guarantee you the Kafka there will stay for another 20 to 30 years. So these things are actually showing up. It's totally normal. It's natural. I think it's healthy because it will, I think you said it. Before it was more about price, a little bit of a different kind of like competition maybe on latency and a few other things. Now, actually, we need to get more creative. We need to get more aggressive. And I really, really welcome this. While at the same time, I think Stan, you said it, and then I'll hand over to you that we'll get far more committers concentrated in one place, which is actually possibly a good thing simply because Kafka will definitely not die. If we are looking at Red Hat, for example, or Hashi, their open source projects are actually thriving. Well, Hashi is not like the greatest example, but on the Red Hat side, we have seen some amazing things happen during the tenure. So yeah, that's my kind of like overview of the situation.
Um, I should speak about this because I was an employee at Confluent for 6 years. I don't want to take the whole talk because I can probably talk a whole hour for this, but to your point earlier that you said you didn't want to talk about the commercial activity. I think on a separate note, I think it's important we talk about commercial activity because that's what defines what the technological activity is going to be to a large extent. Companies build what customers want, but also the corporate structure matters a lot in these things. So I think it's important to focus on that. Now, if you told me in 2018 to 2024 that Confluent would get bought out of IBM, I would have laughed it at your face. That was completely unthinkable back in the day. And I want to bring everybody back a few years when Kafka was hyped up technology, because now in 2020, 25, it's not, it's kind of seen as a boring technology. But let me remind you, if it wasn't 2 years ago, I don't know, but up until 23, I would think it was the hype. It was the hype. People thought that Kafka would change the world. I remember one of the earlier teams we had in Confluent, I think in the space, was this T-shirt, which had, I think it was Fire, the wheel, and then Kafka. And that sort of represented that Kafka was this groundbreaking technology equivalent to Fire or the wheel. So that's how big the hype level was back in the day. And as Confluent was growing and everything, we had very big ambitions. I mean, you don't have to hear from me. You should just read the public statements. The public statements first said that the total addressable market, the TAM of Confluent, was 60 billion. Most recent public documents say that the TAM was 100 billion. And now we see the company sell for 11 billion at a revenue of 1 billion a year. Something doesn't add up. So I think this whole thing is actually very bearish because it sort of proved it proved that the vision that Confluent was painting did not exist, and the vision that it was painting was not achievable in any meaningful way, and that is why the stockholders and the board and everybody decided to sell to IBM at this price. You said it's good for the stockholders. I don't think it's that good for the stockholders. Keep in mind the stock was trading at, I think, 34 this February even. So this year it was trading at a higher price and it got sold. Not to mention the IPO price was 36, and not to mention the high spike it went to 91. I think the stock has just been a story of a subpar. I don't want to say a subpar company because the company ran well and the profits have been increasing and all the financial metrics have been good, but basically a subpar pan out of a vision that was way too bold and could have never happened. So from that point of view, I just want to say I think the story that was painted with stream processing and Kafka being the central nervous system inside companies, I think that story is completely dead. I think that's history. I don't know what direction IBM is going to take it, but there certainly won't be anybody trying to pursue that story to a very, very serious extent. So that's how I want to end it. But there are a lot of, I don't want to expand on this, but there are a lot of things we have to think about how the future will be, how this shapes Apache Kafka as an open source project, how this shapes other companies like Red Panda or Rising Wave or even Ivan. How are you guys going to be setting Kafka? What's the story of Kafka now? The stream processing play a role, etc. I'm gonna leave it to somebody else.
Yeah, Tyler, yeah, you're from Red Panda, and yeah, everyone knows that Red Panda is definitely a very strong competitor to Confluent. And how do you feel, and how it will impact you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stan's. I find your take interesting, Stan, because I feel like, if anything, I felt sort of like it feels like your take is sort of saying like, well, this is validation that like streaming isn't going to conquer the world, and I mean, I agree it's not going to conquer the world, but I also felt like for me, the fact that it was IBM and not private equity felt like a statement of sort of validation that streaming is in kind of a low from as far as a hype cycle perspective goes. But as Philip was saying earlier, like it's not going away. And if anything, I think it's sort of a recognition that like now is actually a great time to get in on sort of the streaming company business because more likely than not, A, it's not going away, but I think it's going to grow significantly in the future. And my suspicion is that they're also kind of eyeing where things are going within the AI space and sort of reasoning about, well, what sort of data infrastructure is going to be necessary to really make AI successful. Um, and expecting that streaming is going to be a key part of that and wanting to get in kind of at the ground floor while they can.
When you say significantly, what's the definition of that? Grow significantly? Like, can you give a number?
No, I can't give a number, but just, you know, I guess my imagination is like think about what we're trying to achieve, we broadly meaning the industry, with AI and agentic AI in general. The idea is, let's bring on a digital, these digital workforces of agents that can, operate within your business. You know, they're
Hmm.
likely going to be processing data in real time. And now obviously, you're not generally sending, gigabytes a second of data through a single agent, but if we're successful at making it possible to deploy agents broadly across enterprises, you're going to end up with many thousands of these things. And the main communication mechanism we're going to be looking at is a streaming style kind of mechanism.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
we will definitely cover the AI part for in another slide.
yeah, so not to
Um,
digress, but just simply kind of like highlighting, like my guess is that's kind of,
mhm,
I'm
Mm.
trying to discern like why would IBM swoop in here and grab this up? And
mhm.
it feels like there's two reasons. One is the existing revenue, the existing customer base, as Philip was saying, but that's a lot of money. 11 billion is a lot of money. It feels like there's some strategic play, you know,
Mhm.
or else IBM's just, it'd be weird if there wasn't a strategic play to it. So that's kind of what I'm wondering if that's what's going on here too.
Mhm. Yeah, I think if you look if you check for the IBM's announcement, where they mentioned a lot about for the real-time context, right? For the basically building the AI agent and basically Confluent can bring real-time context for AI. You can check the news, and that's what yeah their announcement. Um, because we have a separate slide for on the AI part for, and we can
But
definitely, also talk about something more, I mean, traditional and because well, I mean, I know that's what I mean. Actually, before the acquisition, right? So we talk a lot about what the diskless, right, and also talk about for cost efficiency. I know that's where Red Panda is definitely super efficient for comparing with Confluent. Well, I mean, in terms of the cost and in terms of the price, but in terms of everything, right? But well, I mean, this is well, I remember that well 2 months ago when I was in Current, everyone was talking about diskless, and what's going on there? I mean, yeah, tell me something about that, right? And is that a big thing? And who is the I mean, who will be benefit from this architecture?
yeah, maybe I can say a few words here, because
Hmm.
we are working very hard to make sure that Kafka becomes, like less of a burdensome replication. I said it before and I'll repeat it because the message still stands. I was at, like the recent New Orleans Current, and I expected more people to show up when we were talking about this because there is relatively big awareness, right? But at the same time, you see that most of the practitioners which kind of like deploy and operate Kafka have heard about it, know about it, but haven't acted on it for various reasons. The people who are super excited is, for example, people like us who develop the technology because we have seen and witnessed, like the performance characteristics and the cost savings, and obviously the other teams out there which are developing this. Um, but at the same time, I'm certain that Kafka in the cloud will be S3 based, or at least the bulk workloads will be there. Probably not tomorrow, not in 3 months, not in 6 months, but eventually it's just the right architecture. Just makes sense. Now we have those super big levers where S3 acts as our networking layer, as our storage layer, super cheap, super reliable, super available. Obviously, there are a lot of kinks which we need to work out, but long term, this is the right architecture. So where we are is the hype is relatively, flat. We see already a lot of teams trying to push the first kind of like cohort of customers and like practitioners to use it. And once we start releasing more and more use cases out in the wild, I hope that this will inspire other teams to kind of like start adopting. Simply because you do really get a massive benefit for trading 1 second of latency across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also that the major revelation in the space from the last 2 years when WebStream launched was there's a majority of use cases, at least volume based, meaning the majority of gigabytes per second are not as latency sensitive as we thought they are. And I think LinkedIn created Kafka for this massive fan out type of thing, right? Like you ingest 1 byte and you fan it out, you read it 5, 10 times, whatever. But it feels like that's mostly, or I wouldn't say mostly, but largely a LinkedIn type of problem. You have to be that big of a company to really have that many syncs for your 1 byte that you want to send everywhere. So I have a feeling that volume based, at least, and I don't have data to confirm this, but I believe that volume based, most Kafka workloads are basically metrics, logs, or something going to the data lake in one way or another, for which S3 is the destination and diskless is the best solution to do it. And I think that's why we've seen literally every vendor sort of do something around this diskless type of replication-free, slow latency topics. And on that point, I want to bring it to Tyler because Tyler, you guys have the lowest latency Kafka implementation on the market. And I'm curious how you're approaching it. You announced cloud topics. I know you're releasing them. I think it got released, but how do you, as the CTO of Red Panda, think about latency in Kafka topics? Yeah, that's
No,
a
I
question.
think, I mean, I think diskless and kind of the shifting of the latency spectrum kind of towards the higher latency. It's not like no one would call it high latency, but relative to kind of where the disk-full version was. I think it's brilliant. Like it's exactly what people need because the reality of streaming, like, I've been doing streaming for almost 20 years now, and I feel like the most the most consistent theme that I have come up against is that everyone's always like, "Oh, how fast can you do it?" And you're like, "Look, we did this amazing thing. We're super fast." And then they're like, "How much does it cost?" And you're like, "Here's the bill." And they're like, "Whoa, you know what? I don't, never mind. Let's go slower." And so I think, finding ways to be able to meet that, like, I want it fast, but not that fast because I don't want to spend as much money sort of niche is really important. And I think I completely agree. I think diskless is going to take over as far as kind of the bulk of the volume because there's just so many data sets where it's just not worth the money. Like it just plain isn't. At the same time, there are a ton of use cases out there that really, really want that low latency. And that's where like Red Panda does really shine there. And so I think it's been, we've definitely found that that's the place where it's a super no-brainer for people who want to use Red Panda because it just works so well in that space. But that's absolutely not the entire market. And so I love that we are shipping cloud topics as well. I think it fits in really nicely, and it gives you the choice to be able to say, look, where on the spectrum, the cost latency spectrum, do I want to land? And kind of mix and match for whatever use case makes sense.
Yeah. And for Rapana right now, you have yeah, low latency option and as well as the diskless option, right? Do you have diskless option these days?
Yeah, so we have cloud topics is in beta, I believe, and then
Mm-hmm.
we have shortly.
And how much cheaper it will be compared to the the low latency one?
Honestly, I don't know the pricing off the top of my head. But
Okay.
I would imagine it'll be sort of in line with everyone else's kind of tiering of diskable
Okay.
versus.
And yeah. And Philip, I'm not sure whether you have a number because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know that's
sure.
what you guys
Yeah,
were. I mean, in Ivan's case, were you just offer diskless or what?
yeah. I want to offer diskless as the default topic type at Ivan.
Hmm.
And I'm like all of the engineers when I start speaking in like in my team, they're all like, oh, it's too, like it's too slow. No, it's great. You need latency only when you need it, right? Let's start with something simple. For the record, I spent too many hours for a business person dealing with benchmarks, but I had to do it because I wanted to learn the guts of the performance profile. Diskless does very well between 1.5 and 1.8 seconds end to end. Obviously, you can tune this. We can do some, tricks, for example, with different Axe, for example, and some other developments. But the beauty of diskless Kafka is that we probably won't go lower than 1.5 seconds, and I'll tell you why. Because you keep the normal Kafka topics. You want fast and can replicate it, knock yourself out. It's 100 milliseconds or less. In certain cases, it's like 50 and below if you tune it correctly. So we don't want to do too many things when it comes to slower Kafka, right? We want to actually focus and optimize for cost. And this is where we will be. So it's 1.5 seconds for 90+% savings versus something faster.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. All
And
right.
I
Thanks.
think another topic worth touching on, no pun intended, is the fact that it's topic based. I think now I think about it, it's only Red Panda. Tyler, I forgot, is Cloud Topics released, just to be clear?
Yeah, it's in beta.
Okay, it's available. So it's only diskless topics in Cloud Topics in Red Panda, diskless topics in Apache Kafka. It's going to be in Ivan's fork, temporary fork. These are the only two solutions that sort of support the flexibility of having the same type, the different kinds of topics in the same cluster. Confluent Freight is only slow topics. WarpStream is only slow topics. BuffStream is only slow topics. AutoMQ, I'm not sure actually, but what do you guys think? How do you think about this? Do you think the flexibility is important? Because in my opinion, it's extremely important.
Mm, what I see from the earliest onboarding customers, I was surprised something. There you go, something from from the latest few days. Many customers, to my surprise, show up and say, I want full diskless. I don't want to mix. I've given up to police my workloads. Can we just create a diskless cluster, right? And I'll dump everything there. I was surprised, to be honest. I was always expecting 90% diskless, 10% like super fast, topic something for, like for real time or 80%. But the more we stay in this market, the more we see like, can we just like do maximum savings? Or maybe it's just like the early adopters or these guys which figured out that they can, like get this advantage from the cost. So this is like what I hear and see from, prospects and customers, but it could evolve in the future. I'm all in on ultimate flexibility at the end of the day, especially because I see it from a cloud service perspective. I want to make sure you just press a button and you just stream. But at the same time, I feel like many people will just give up on this and say like, can I just do 1 second across my estate and I don't care.
Hmm. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I know that's all. Yeah. This collection is definitely a pretty hot topic, and I think 1150, right? And it's already approved, right? Is that
Fingers crossed soon.
okay? Okay, that's great. Well, and which means that's okay. So I mean, yeah, just give a brief intro about well the yeah the 1150. Well, basically it will basically bring the disk list to the official Apache repository. Sorry, the Kafka repository. So which means that's okay. Even if you run open source Kafka, it'll be like a disk list, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it happened, but well, yeah, let's keep an eye on that. Yeah, that's a diskless. And another thing I believe that Confluent talk a lot about is stream processing, right? So I mean, it's definitely quite relevant to Writing Wave because well, you guys now know that okay, Writing Wave is definitely doing stream processing. And for Confluent, well, I mean, you know that well, they heavily bet on Flink, right? Well, they basically over the last 3 years, they just put put everything on. I mean, at least well, I mean, especially this year, right? Well, I mean, in their earning calls, where they only mention one thing that is Flink. Um, so yeah, definitely want to know what you guys will think about as well. And I mean, as a stream processing vendor, I can probably share something. The first of all, I mean, I don't know how the acquisition will impact the Flink business in Confluent. I hope that's where they will keep running the business. Well, I mean, Flink business. Well, yeah, right. Well, because well, I think well, I do believe that okay, IBM do have the motivation to sell more Kafka as well as Flink, right? Well, basically sell more Confluent services. And but well, from what I can see, I feel that's why okay, in the long run, there will be definitely some overlaps between the stream processing and the data streaming space. Well, I mean, it's not like okay, let's just try to replace Kafka with Red Panda. Sorry, with Flink or with Writing Wave. It's not like that. Well, it's more about okay, look, well, in some cases, well, I mean, whether we can simplify the architecture, right? Well, so, for example, CDC, right? Well, for example, the simple ingestion, right? Well, if you just want to ingest the data, do you really want to have into Flink, right? Well, into Writing Wave, do you really want to have a Kafka, right? I believe that definitely after the acquisition, definitely there something be changed. Um, and in the meanwhile, I mean, people always complain about well, talking about what Confluent for the revenue, right? Well, Confluent Flink revenue, and yeah. So right now, last for the last earning call, they mentioned that well, it's $10 million, right? Well, from Flink. I mean, it's a reasonably good number, but well, I mean, compared to the Confluent, it's a public company, right? Well, and compared to the Confluent for the size, right, it's definitely very tiny. But what I feel is that, well, I mean, they probably, I mean, personally, I feel that, well, okay, they probably made some mistakes regarding how to sell Flink. Because well, I feel that's well, okay. First of all, if you look at well how they sell, right? Well, they basically sell Flink as a KCODB alternative. It's not like a standalone project. It's not a standalone product, and you cannot just buy okay, buy buy sorry buy Flink on right. You have to buy Kafka first, and then okay buy the Flink add-on. I think that's probably some mistake, and I know that will also a lot of workloads about okay migrating from KCODB to Flink, and you know that well KCODB is already it's probably yeah it's okay, but well, I mean the migration actually cost more money, right? Well, from the to the customers from the customer's perspective. So I think that definitely customers will be very hesitant about okay whether they want to move to Flink. But in our case, well, I mean, we are more like independent. We don't, I mean, if you want to use Writing Wave, you probably don't really need to have a Confluent Kafka, right? But it's not like that. Well, you can basically have all kinds of the services you want to run in the upstream, right? Or you can directly insert data into Writing Wave. That's also fine. Yeah, and Stan, I know that's where you definitely have some strong opinions on this, right? And yeah, feel free to share. Yeah.
I don't know if they're strong, but I think they're correct because Confluent got sold, and I was saying that Flink is not going to make money, and they're going to have to either change strategy or get acquired, and they did get acquired. Um, I think I have a lot of thoughts here, but if I can summarize it, I would probably say that stream processing has its use, but the use I think is very niche, and it's niche to particular fields, like let's say fraud detection. You also know it's a niche field because every time somebody gives you a stream processing example, they always say payment fraud detection because there's very little other things that you can sort of do with streaming. I mean, there are, but you can probably count it on two hands. So from that point of view, stream processing is niche and it's going to remain niche. And Confluent's history has been trying to shoehorn it into all sorts of other fields, including microservices. They released streaming agents now. Now, to their credit, they have a weird strategy where they market the fact that they're using Flink but they're not selling you Flink per se, they're selling you hosted products on top of it. So it's mostly like an interface on their cloud. Maybe you can use some of the Flink APIs, but not everything is supported. From a business perspective, of course, it doesn't matter what you build a certain product. If you give me a product that's called a streaming agent and reacts in real time to data, it doesn't matter what it's built with. But Flink is overkill for building such a thing, so I wouldn't even market it with that. I think stream processing is just a story of everybody trying to monetize this hype cycle. Stream processing was in a big hype cycle, and nobody managed to monetize it. I've seen other companies pivot well. Responsive, for example, was a few very good engineers from Confluent creating their own company offering services around Kafka streams, and they pivoted away from that. I'm sure there's other examples I'm forgetting, but I'm pretty bearish stream processing. And I think I want to ask you, Tyler, because you said you had 20 years of experience in streaming. What do you think about, for example, something like Spark structured streaming, which, as far as I understand, is micro batch based streaming with latency probably less than a minute? I feel like this is a similar story to the diskless thing.
Yeah, so I have many thoughts here. I think I agree with you on the I think where Flink really lands and really shines is those kind of like the complex fraud detection use cases, like these use cases where you're like, I really want low latency. There's a bunch of state involved. Maybe there's a bunch of code I need to write. And I agree that that ends up being a super niche sort of arena. And so there's not a whole lot there. But I think depending on how you define stream processing, I do disagree on stream processing itself being a niche area, because I think if you expand it into particularly just kind of the data transformation space, the streaming data transformation space of like, I continuously want to be transforming data over time. And if you're expanding it, the latency to include those use cases that have historically been like the nightly batch jobs and things that people run on MapReduce or Hadoop or Spark or whatever, it's actually a huge market. And I think that's where like structured streaming itself, I think is too adjacent to Flink as far as kind of ease of use and the complexities of getting your hands on it. But I think things like dynamic tables that we did at Snowflake, Delta Live tables that Databricks has, and also Materialize is focused more on that transactional space. So they've kind of narrowed the market that they're good at addressing. But from an interface perspective, this like very clean, simple, SQL interface that anybody can use and can span that latency spectrum. I think it's actually a very large market. And like, you look at how much Snowflake and Databricks are making on their offerings, it's a lot of money.
But can you give some example on this? Because my thinking here is that the streaming paradigm has a whole lot of cost to it. And that's why people generally tend to not use it. It's really hard to understand how to do window processing and all of these complexities. And what you just said, how does that relate to something like a ClickHouse or an Apache Pinot? Because I see that these technologies, I think, see much greater use in the field than, let's say, Flink.
So I think from an adoption perspective, speaking SQL, plain SQL, kind of normal SQL that people can reason about is super important. Dealing in streams themselves is hard. It's, that's where all this windowing stuff, that I certainly played a big part in, advocating for in the early days. Like, it's really complicated and it's really hard to wrap your head around. And if you can have your customers just think about like, what do I want the end data set to look like? And you just make that happen for them over time. That's so much more accessible. And then you're going to have people in marketing, people who can, lots of people can write SQL. Very few people can like look at Windows and think about watermarks and things like that and actually, get it to work the way they want. If they can just speak like, here's the SQL query, materialize this thing for me. And kind of here's a slider where I can tell you how much latency can I afford. That's where you really like hit the adoption curve. And then, there was this part of your question that I didn't touch on yet, the micro batching stuff. Like, I think the important thing is you want to give the most efficient implementation you can for whatever latency the customer is asking for. And I think the reality is similar to the diskless conversation. Higher latency is actually a bigger set. The bigger market is at the higher latency side. So single digit seconds up to minutes and even hours of latency. And you don't want a streaming, you don't want like a record by record kind of Flink style streaming system for those. You want a proper batching system that can get the efficiencies that you'd want. And so again, that's why Snowflake and Databricks are making money hand over fist on this stuff because they can offer it at a price point where people are like, sweet, yes, like I'll write a SQL query and it's going to transform this massive data set over time, and that's just going to keep running and keep printing money for you. So I think there is a lot of money in stream processing, but it's most of the money is actually in that space of kind of the higher latency end of the spectrum. But you also have to solve the ease of use question, and Flink and structured streaming don't do that.
But can we define that as batching too, as batch
Uh,
processing, for
so
instance?
So yeah, look, well, I want to put some thoughts here. So look, well, I don't really think that will Flink equals to stream processing, okay? And I think what stream processing is actually a much bigger concept. Well, I mean, I would like to call it well continuous processing. For what continuous processing is, well, if you think about well, if you have let's say click streams, right? Well, if you think about well, if you have let's say any kinds of logistics or like energy, right, or data stream, time series data, right? So basically, you want to continually transform the data. What do you mean? That's what about the latency? It's not like it definitely, yeah, it could be like, okay, sub-second. It could be like a second level, right? But well, I mean, it could be also be like minute level, right? Well, I can transform my data every single minute, or I can transform my data, let's say, every single hour. That's fine. So I would like to call it, well, I mean, like incremental batch, micro batch, or stream processing, whatever, right? Well, but for Flink, they are pretty much focused on that part, right? When basically low latency stream processing, and we definitely want to do, let's say, second level.
Yeah.
But I mean, from what I can see, and especially from Rising Wave perspective, we don't really see things like that. Well, I mean, we are thinking more about continuous processing instead of like just okay, just a sub-second. And so Tyler mentioned well, dynamic table, right? We also have also in Confluent, what is called what DLT, right? Well, they're live table, and in Redshift they also materialized views. So we essentially, I mean, you are basically, I mean, I think, well, I mean, if you look at well, all these kind of technologies, well, I mean, that's definitely much bigger concepts or compared to just like second level freshness or stream processing. And I totally agree with you that okay, I mean, if you just focus on let's say second level freshness or stream processing, then it will be payment trading, e-commerce, and some others. But in what we can see in Riding Wave is that okay, look, well, apart from the trading, payments, or e-commerce, whatever, right? Well, I mean, you also have logistics. I mean, all these kind of time series database, right? Well, what they are doing, right? Well, basically the battery, energy, manufacturing. Yeah, very traditional businesses who do probably do not really need sub-second latency, but they definitely want to have continuous
Mm.
transformation. So that's what we can see from Rising Wave perspective. Yeah.
I just want to take a step back to stateful stream processing, the one which we basically discuss here with this group, right? Like sub-second transformations on write path, right? So before the data gets, like stored. And I'm a product manager, and I've been selling Flink for longer than I'd like to. But at the same time, this is my hot take here. Is stateful stream processing a good business in general? I would argue probably not. And acquisition will just accelerate this. What we'll probably see is that there will be some defunding happening across the board. It's already happening, right? So it's a few companies already got, like the Flink-based companies. Obviously, Alibaba and, like the very big contributors will be always there, right? Because they use it. I've seen insane setups there with petabytes of data. But for the ordinary people, like what Stan said, like this is too hard. But again, it can be hard, but it's really bringing something valuable to the table. Say, like meaningful reduction in your Snowflake bill, or something which can actually make your life eventually better. People usually tend to do it, right? Even if it's hard and rough on the edges. The big problem here, and I was asking myself the other day, this wouldn't Flink be a better business if Iceberg didn't exist? I probably would say yes. I cannot explain you how many times I've seen customers I call them poor man's data lakes, where they just set up an open source Iceberg with a catalog, right, in their own S3 bucket, just to make sure that their data engineers refresh that little bit less on Snowflake so that they hit the refresh button on the computer, right, the BIs, to ensure that they can actually shave off their bills. That's why actually Iceberg and ClickHouse and like this plethora of kind of like low latency query engines will continue winning simply because they solve the problem. The problem is the very large bill I'm getting from the tier one vendors when it comes to like continuous querying or continuous kind of like or mutating a delta table, etc. And Flink was aiming at kind of like carving out some of those dollars because basically the best way to eliminate a query is not to have it, right? I would just make sure that the dashboard just works, right, continuously. But I think it's just missed that train. So this is where I'm kind of like, this is where my opinion is when it comes to, is this a good business? Probably not. At least for now, at least with the technology capability we have.
I think that's a great point. I've heard similar things I want to expand on that. For example, somebody like Databricks, I've been told that they sell sort of managed Spark at absurd prices to do some simple transformation. And this reminds me sort of the diskless story as well, where we seem to be talking about a point where it's not technology, fundamental technological limits that's limiting what we could do or why something is cheaper or not, but it's actually tier one or big vendor business decisions. So in the case of AWS and Azure, AWS charges you 2 cents a gigabyte for interzone traffic. And that's why Kafka is so expensive there, because you have the producers doing that traffic, the replication, and the consumers. Azure charges you zero. In real life, this sort of traffic costs very little. You set up the network link between the data centers and it's sort of free from then on. So the sole reason diskless exists is honestly just business decisions down the way, because AWS has created this sort of walled garden which locks you in and charges you for things that under the hood, technologically speaking, don't need to be this expensive. If they install faster network links, it's not like the price should go higher or lower per se. It mostly gets averaged out. And I think this point that you made, Philip, you can say if that's what you meant, but that's how I understood it, is that sometimes you need a new technology or a new vendor to do things maybe in a new way, maybe not, but usually doing it in a new way helps with building a narrative and setting people that your way is better. But at the end of the day, if they can offer it for a lower price, which I think many people can, because the tier one vendors can sort of put arbitrary prices based on something. I'm not necessarily sure that the refresh in Snowflake costs as much or anything as close to as much as they charge you for it. So
Mm.
yeah, it's business decisions the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have already discussed, well, yeah, touched the iceberg, right? Well, I think well, definitely 2025 is a big year for iceberg, and we do see a lot of adoptions. Well, and continue the conversation regarding Apache Flink. I think, well, from writing perspective, I mean, we are very different from Flink in that, well, you know that, well, we definitely put a lot of efforts in iceberg. And think about that. Well, if you want to do transformation, right? Well, in Iceberg, right? Well, basically so bronze layer, level, a layer to silver layer, and silver layer to brown, to gold, right? What do you do? I mean, you basically do need to do transformation. And what's the transformation tools, right? Well, okay, yeah, you can definitely use Spark, right? Well, and but if you want to use Spark, you definitely also want to have an orchestration tool, right? And that's why Databricks sells basically the Spark streaming. Basically, you do not really need to have an orchestration tool, right? Well, why you want to have two different tools if you can just solve the problem using one single tool, right? But for Spark streaming, is it like do you really care about, well, let's say, I mean it. I mean, what the capability it provides is basically continuous processing, or yeah, right, well, like minute level freshness, that's fine. For Reading Wave, we also pretty much focus on that part, but especially in the iceberg context. But I think well, Flink probably have different opinions on that part, and I could not comment too much about that. Well, I'm not in their committee, right? Well, and I don't know what we do. But well, I mean, from you guys, well, so I mean, for Flip and also for Repanda, I know that's what you guys were like doing a lot of things as well as well. I heard, well, I mean, from your blogs, right? Well, you guys also mentioned a lot about iceberg. How do you see the iceberg adoption?
Um,
And what do we do for
I have a
Iceberg?
very funny anecdote about this. Maybe I'll lead into the iceberg. I'm literally threatened by customers right now to release the iceberg topics, which I guess is a good sign that there is, like adoption there. Where I'm where I'm really concerned about this, about that when we talk about the adoption is what Stan said in the beginning. This is the next savior for data, right? The hype will die down in 3 to 4, 5 years, whenever it will, like it will do, and then we'll create this heap of, technical debt. Something else will show up. The cloud, by the way, will advance a lot. S3 will get faster, cheaper, better, more resilient, etc. And then we will end up again like in this loop of 3 to 5 year cycles where we move from one foundational technology to another. So I sincerely hope here we are actually building a protocol. We are building something which is far more foundational than just the next hype. But when it comes to adoption, we one of the most used connectors, sync connectors in our fleet, and we have close to 1,300 connectors in general in total. I think the second most used one is the Iceberg connector, and it's growing. Like we have a lot of pressure from customers and prospects to basically sync all of their streaming data in Iceberg, especially for archival purposes and like downstream operations to feel like to train machine learning and some other models like generative more recently. Yeah.
And yeah, Tyler, in Rapanda, do you see the same thing or what?
Well, I mean, I would say for me, 2025 seemed like the year that adoption with Iceberg is finally starting to catch up with the hype. Like the hype was there, but the hype's been there for a while. And I think it became a blocking technology a while ago. Like if you didn't have an Iceberg story, it was a problem. But at the same time, there were a bunch of companies who would show up and be like, if you don't have this, it's a problem, but they weren't actually using it yet either. I think 2025 was the year where that started to change, where we've started to see like it's flipping towards more of the companies are actually using it. They've actually started implementing it. They're, it's the traction is more broadly there. Of course, there've been companies that have been all in on Iceberg for years and have big installations, but sort of broadly across the industry, I think this was the year where it started to feel like Iceberg is actually starting to arrive. And I think 2026 it will be a lot more mature usage. And I agree with what Philip was saying as far as I think, even in the previous conversation, essentially, like I think the reason Iceberg has been so important is really that it's unlocking, it's removing the vendor lock-in that people were getting with things like Snowflake, and sort of democratizing access to that type of data and making it feel like, okay, maybe I still want to use Snowflake, maybe I still want to use Databricks, but like I can use other tools with it. I don't just have to use what Snowflake has built. But B, if I want to switch around or whatever, this is really valuable. And so it is in a lot of ways, it feels like the spec and the protocol is what's important here. A little bit less so than the tech, which I think is valuable for the world.
Hmm. Uh, yeah, Stan, do you have any comments? Well, I'm not
Yeah,
sure whether you also work on Iceberg. Yeah.
no, I don't work, but I'm familiar with it. It is mostly a spec thing from what I've read too, from people who founded it or had companies in there. I think it just makes a lot of sense. If you give me a spec that lets me put my data in a specific standard format that we agree on, that's a table format in my data lake, which previously was 10 different formats or maybe even without a format, I think that's a great sell. And what we're seeing right now, which I think is significant, is we're seeing the network effect build up in real time. Like right now, everybody is introducing Iceberg support. Everybody is learning what Iceberg is, how it works, its spec, etc. Iceberg engineers, or data engineers at least, are becoming Iceberg proficient. And I think the sort of network effect, once it builds up, it becomes something like a Kafka. And that's why Kafka is so used everywhere. There are technologies that are better than Kafka that saw Kafka's weaknesses and made something better, but the network effect is what keeps Kafka as the thing that's being talked about, built upon, and ultimately deployed. So, so yeah, I think Iceberg is winning.
Yeah. Yeah, we have around 5 minutes left and I'm super interested about AI and especially, yeah, Confluent, yeah, mentions where they have the context engine, right? And basically it's much better to use, right? For this, yeah, what ResonWave has. But well, I mean, yeah, Tyler, I mean, you guys were building. I mean, I know that's where you guys were definitely a huge, yeah, have a huge investment in AI, and you guys will have the agentic data plan. So, could you please show us more, okay, about what it is yeah, yeah, and how different? I mean, how it's related to Kafka?
So I mean, the agentic data plan, the short version of it is it's a data access layer for agents. So it's really a governance layer that you know works as the glue between all the data sources and systems you have in your enterprise and all of your
Hmm.
agents, and allows you to feel like you have the visibility, observability, control over those agents and the data that they're accessing. They're accessing the right data. They're making they're writing the correct data. They're not doing things they shouldn't. All that sort of stuff. Streaming plays a huge part of this. That's why we feel like we're kind of the right company to be tackling this problem, and that a distributed log is a foundational underpinning of things. Data connectivity, which we have in Red Panda Connect, is a huge portion of it as well. But I also try to be very clear that like this, we're not showing up and saying it's all about streaming, because I don't think it is. Like um, there's a whole bunch of stuff related to querying data and accessing context and things like that. That's not really a streaming problem. You can solve some of that with something like Context Engine, but it's a broader set of problems than just streaming in data and providing lookups. And then a whole bunch of it is really around governance and kind of management of things. So for us, it's a big expansion of what we're doing. We have our streaming business, and we're continuing to build on top of that. But we've acquired Oxla for the querying capabilities. We've built out a bunch of AI integrations. We're building out a bunch of governance features as well. So it's really a big expansion of our business for us. But we see that as kind of the what you need in order to solve this. If you're just going to try to fit everything into streaming, I think you're going to find that it works really well for a few use cases, but it's kind of limiting.
Yeah. And Philip, are you guys working on AI?
Yeah, we have a luxury at Ivan because we have actually the primary business of Ivan is Postgres to begin with. We also recently have seen very healthy growth into ClickHouse as well, for across our different products in the portfolio. But I have the luxury of looking at Postgres and looking at Kafka at the same time and just like figuring out which tool is better prepared to capitalize on the generative AI wave, right? Because this is what everybody's looking, like how do I capitalize and show meaningful growth and meaningful traction into, with these technologies versus what's going on in the hype cycle when we talk about generative AI. And you know me, I've been doing Kafka for many years, and I will continue doing Kafka, but I think immediately we are looking at Postgres as something much, much more important when it comes to generative AI, not only because vibe coding basically 100% relies on Postgres as the backend for those, small apps, but more importantly because a good connection between something like S3 or Iceberg on S3 or some, like large data warehousing you usually or traditionally use plus your Postgres traditionally will provide you the necessary means to have the snapshot context for your agent. I personally think that 50 events per second, and this is, I always give this example, like sending 50 events per second to an agent is probably a very terrible architecture, simply because the decisions may usually, like end up very, very wrong the faster you actually send context to the agent. So this goes back to, again, to like a specific use case. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but it will definitely happen slower than, for example, Postgres. And I think we need to turn the question is, when is Kafka going to have its Postgres moment when we talk about generative AI? And I'm really happy to see, for example, Tyler and the Red Panda team. You guys are pushing a lot in this direction. I'm really, really curious to see what will come out on the other end when it comes to like the agentic the connective tissue, because this is a great idea, and I'm looking forward to see if we can actually get more growth as an industry. So right now, the fundamentals are pointing to agents needing snapshots versus continuous stream of millions of events per second with millisecond latency. But I hope that at some point we get actually very practical about low latency context into those generative AI applications, which will be able to, like help businesses make better decisions, because this is ultimately what they are for, right? Make a better decision, make more money, cut costs. There are a few very simple levers they usually end up pulling.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are almost running out of time. Actually, sorry. Yeah, it's sorry running out of time. And so I mean, guys, well, I mean, could you please just give me, yeah, just have one sentence summary about, okay, what's your prediction for 2026? And yeah, what are main bet? Yeah. And Stan, what you want to start with? Yeah.
I don't have a single prediction for 26. I think these things move very slow. I think we just sort of see the slow progression of the trends we have today. So Iceberg gets more adopted, Kafka continues being built upon, the IBM acquisition finishes, and we see what happens with Confluent. And for the smaller players in the space, I'm not particularly bullish, but we see what they do. But I don't have anything interesting as a single prediction 26.
Okay. And Philip? Yeah.
I'm very focused on costs and infrastructure right now, so I sincerely hope that S3 is officially recognized as the shared disk. So,
Okay.
well, S3 is like the object storage, right? So I really, really hope that people start understanding more and more distributed object storage and are looking into it more seriously as the primary disk for everything they do.
Yeah. And Tyler.
I think for me, I'm hoping that 2026, as we kind of talked earlier about how like 2025 was the year that Iceberg, it really felt like Iceberg kind of arrived. Like it's been in this hype cycle, but the breadth of adoption seemed to be there. I don't think we're going to get there with agentic in 2026, but I do hope that 2026 is the year where we feel like we've finally kind of solved how to do agentic AI in the enterprise. And we'll hopefully be, sometime next year have, go from the world where we are now, where it's just like hardly anybody is succeeding at it, to feeling like we've got the patterns and approaches mapped out, and then can kind of head toward
Yeah.
the broad adoption from there. That's my hope.
Yeah, and for me, well, I mean, so I believe that's what definitely for 2026, well, Iceberg will be continuing to be very big, and everyone just to move towards Iceberg. And for Kafka, definitely there's some simpler architecture, right? Well, and definitely diskless, and probably people just make well even simpler version of Kafka, right? Or even serverless or free tier, right? Well, in Ivan's case, and for AI, definitely everyone is well. I believe as well. For AI, there are a lot of things can be done, like AI SRE, right? Well, or AI like I don't know what I mean. Developer tools, right? So yeah, for ice for yeah. Anyways, well, to summarize, I believe that's what definitely yeah, Iceberg adoption, simpler Kafka, and yeah, more AI usage. Cool. I definitely believe that we are running out of time, and really thank you for everyone for joining this webinar, and I hope that everyone has a really good holiday. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
All
having
right.
us.
Thank you.